Coming up, we meet more of Nevada's groundbreaking women, and we discover how world events help them to challenge the boundaries of tradition. In 1930, the state of Nevada, like the rest of the nation, suffered from the contraction of the Great Depression. Women had gained the right to vote, but in the workplace, gender and race still divided jobs. Women used their wits and skills to help keep their families afloat. In 1931, work began on the Hoover Dam, which at that time was called the Boulder Dam. Many American men, desperate for work, uprooted their families and moved them to southern Nevada in hopes of a better life. It could not have been easy for the women to raise their families in this strange new world. While construction on the dam continued in Nevada, changes were in the works for the rest of the nation, too.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt established the New Deal in response to the Great Depression, and the 21st Amendment ended prohibition. The country would soon experience its second major shock of a generation.
December 7th, 1941, a day of infamy.
It was less than a decade later, in 1941, that the attack on Pearl Harbor catapulted the U.S. into World War II. As American soldiers went overseas to fight, women across the nation rose to a new challenge.
After the war started, then the men went into the armed forces, and so they needed somebody to replace them. And so instead of manpower, now we're going to have woman power. Women went into the workforce.
We are more familiar nationally with the image of Rosie the Riveter, who entered industry and built airplanes and ships. In Henderson, it was Magnesium Maggie.
Basic Magnesium Incorporated, which helped establish the town of Henderson, was a production plant that supplied magnesium during the war. Magnesium was used to create incendiary munition casings and various airplane parts. Women worked side by side with men in the plant in several areas, including mixing the necessary chemicals.
The theory was that if these women, if you could give them a formula, much as the cake recipe, they could mix the chemicals safely, and it worked. It was really a dangerous place to work. Sometimes it got to be 130 degrees in there, and there was no air conditioning in there.
But BMI did offer workers housing. White and black workers lived separately, and their children went to separate daycares. Despite the demanding conditions, the women of BMI worked hard and were generally respected by their male counterparts. These women enjoyed working in better-paying jobs, and many remained in the workforce after the war ended.
Historians all agree that that was the biggest watershed for working women in the history of the country. Previous to that, women that were married and working were looked down, were frowned upon. After World War II, the stereotype of the working woman changed completely. Women realized they were competent and capable, they could do these things, you know, and American society would never be the same again.
While there's plenty more to discover about women's roles after the war, for now, let's meet one more maker, Lubertha Johnson. Johnson came to Las Vegas during World War II and became a civil rights pioneer. Lubertha Johnson was a college-educated professional who worked for the Urban League just before moving to Las Vegas in 1943.
She was quintessential. She was a businesswoman. She was a federal employee. She was one of the first federal employees that I've ever known.
Lubertha Johnson worked for Basic Magnesium Incorporated as the recreational director in Carver Park. Carver Park is the black housing area built by the federal government to house black workers at Basic Magnesium Incorporated.
At the time, blacks were segregated from whites in Nevada. in schools, in casinos, in housing. In Las Vegas, African Americans lived in what was called the West Side, but Johnson bucked the system and brought a large property in Paradise, which wasn't on the West Side.
It was about 30-some acres, and she called it her farm. And it's where she raised chickens and a few farm animals and vegetables and all kinds of things.
Johnson's farm became a popular gathering place for the black community. In 1945, as World War II came to an end, Lubertha Johnson became involved with the NAACP. She would later become the president of its local chapter. Johnson also earned the distinction of being Southern Nevada's first black nurse. Over the years, she continually served the Las Vegas community in a variety of ways.
She started this nonprofit organization called Operation Independence, where they provided educational services, training, child care to people, to individuals, so that they could go out and find employment.
Johnson was a powerful voice for equality, social change, and education. Despite barriers related to discrimination, she never ceased seeking out opportunities for herself and others. And this is the epitome of a maker. Lubertha Johnson lived in Las Vegas until her death in 1989. The efforts of individual women and groups of women greatly affected the course of Nevada's history. Next up, we hear why three modern makers think it's important to recognize the accomplishments of people in the past.
We need to look back and say, these are sacrifices that were made for us. These are people who lived and sometimes died for us.
I feel like those women were great. I feel like they did as much as they know how to do while they were doing it.
I don't know, do we need to know who George Washington was?